Tasman District Council. So I've been asked to speak today on the regulations, the current regulations that we have in the district for sediment control, and also what tools we have available. So, in particular, anyone who are landowners here, what tools Tasman District Council can offer you. So just to give a little bit of an overview of the national regulations currently, and I say currently, we have the Resource Management Act. This coalition government is promising some massive reform to that sometime later this year. But at the moment, we've got the Resource Management Act, and one of the key drivers of the purpose of the Act is safeguarding the life supporting capacity of soil. As a regional council, Tasman District Council is a unitary, so it's both regional and territorial district city functions as well. But as part of our regional council functions, the control of land use for soil conservation and protecting the quality and quantity of water and ecosystems in both freshwater bodies and the coastal is part of our remit. Then you have a set of national policy statements that obviously sit nationally. You've got the freshwater management NPS. That's really about protecting and enhancing freshwater ecosystems, their health and habitat. Again, that's going to be undergoing some sort of review and reform and change this year with the government. We've got the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement and a really strong policy intent there. It's about assessing and monitoring sedimentation levels, but also controlling the impacts of sedimentation from a whole raft of activities on land and the impacts on the coastal environment. Then you have a set of national environmental standards, which basically act as the rules and regulation, and these act nationally to standardise regulatory controls. We've got the National Environmental Standard for Commercial Forestry. It used to be called the Plantation Forestry, and that really is about managing the environmental effects of forestry. You've got the NES for freshwater, again managing environmental effects for the protection of freshwater ecosystems. And the other key relevant one here is the freshwater farm regulations that have come in more recently. These are really quite practical action plans, and they're really focused on the specific bespoke action plans for your farm. So you have to look at catchment context, the challenges and values. And within the Motueka catchment, Helen Forsey here is the facilitator. And they are So I've talked about current regulations, but really we're in quite a interesting period of flux in terms of what the central government's doing in this space. And then specific to the Motueka River, we have the Water Conservation Order that was brought in by Fish and Game. That really preserves and protects the outstanding characteristics, features and values of the waters, and to try and keep it in its natural state. So really there's a lot of restrictions on alterations to river flows, form and the water quality. That flows down into consents where there's particular things around fish passage and protection of the trout spawning areas during the seasons, damming restrictions and things like that. So again, when land use activities go into a consented space in council, we look at the WCO and how we can enforce that. But then we go down into what happens here in the Tasman area. Obviously, everything we do has to be consistent with those higher national regulations. So we have the guiding Tasman Resource Management Plan, and that really sets out all the key objectives, policies, regulations and methods of implementation. And I'm just going to focus today on the rules or the regulations. In terms of our land areas and land disturbance, in the Tasman area, currently we've got 2 land disturbance areas. One, land disturbance area 2 is just to do with the separation point granite, which is a lot of this Motueka catchment. Land disturbance area 1 covers the rest of the district. So what I've got here in the box is, it's not the definitive list, but this gives you an idea of what the permitted activities are. So if you meet these conditions, you can do the land activity as of right. If you do not meet them, you go into the consented space. So really, it's about not diverting, damming, eroding the bed of a river or a stream. We're looking at promoting that bare ground is protected from soil erosion by revegetation. We have some permitted soil disturbance activities, but it's restricted on the degree of slope. And then they are to comply with water discharge rules. Those are in another chapter of the TRMP, and those are around two of the key ones here around the discharge of sediment or debris from land disturbance activities and the discharge of vegetation or debris. So you can read the text there. It's again, it's looking at visual clarity issues. It's looking at water quality issues and activities that don't disrupt the waterways too much. Just to again in the land disturbance area 1, we've got, I guess, the one of the key regulations here is the earthworks one, where we have a trigger that earthworks cannot be more than 1 hectare or over 1 metre in height or depth, and then you go into the consented space. This is a rule that's been quite contentious, I would say, and this is one that's we're looking to we're revisiting and re-clarifying it in our land official plan change. We've got a lot of techniques around setbacks from waterways. Then again, there's a lot of things that are coming in terms of how we can reduce the impact of sediment flowing off things like tracks and roads and landing sites for forestry. So cut-offs and culverts and a lot of on the ground things to trying to keep the soil from mobilising. I've got up there the NESCF regulations prevail in land disturbance area 1. It's a little bit different when you get into separation point granite. It's part in the forest area as part of the National Environmental Standards for Commercial Forestry. There are some exceptions that the rules in our plan can be more stringent than those national regulations when it comes to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management and the objective that meets a policy in that statement. When it comes to the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, when it comes to separation point granite, so former manager in the environmental policy really advocated for that due to the characteristics of the separation point granite, and karst geology. So there are a few restrictions where we can be more stringent. And as a result, some of our more stringency means that the degree of slope is more stringent than in the land disturbance area 1. And in particular that if you are forming a road, a tracking, a landing site subdivision, that the cut batter, the average height depth is less than 0.5 metres. So that's very restrictive. That means that doing something in that space puts you into a consented space, which means that we can install things like erosion sediment control plan and the certification of that as a condition on the consent, and a whole lot of other things that the consent team can use to ensure that there's really tight controls on things that happen in the separation point granite. Okay, so this is just a look at the fact that, there's land disturbance activities, but actually what underpins them all is these what we're calling sensitive geologies, and that has an impact on what the characteristics of the sediment and its impact and how it mobilises. The green is the karst geologies. Orange is the separation point granite, so a lot of that, of course, is in this Motueka catchment. The Muturi gravels are in yellow, and that's quite a concerning one because that's where we have the clays and the fine silt, and that has a lot of impact on the suspended sediment, whereas the granite, in a sense, is it's got the feldspar, it can drop out. You have less of the suspended sediment issues there. However, with the separation point granite, we've got obviously a lot of slope as well, so that factor feeds into it. Highly erodible, the separation point granite, deeply weathered. We can have a high volume of material, as Liz has said before, particularly with big floods. The Mutu gravels in the Richmond Hills, really problematic. The fine clays, they can consolidate and smother, and we've seen that also out into the coast. The karst geology and, the sinkholes, really, they're just conduits straight into the subterranean zone. So we've got particular protections already for those throughout the Tasman Resource Management Plan. Trying to look at what kind of protections and buffers and setbacks we can have, particularly with nitrates coming off and runoff. And also we're looking at the aquifer bearing geology, so your unconsolidated gravels and all the rest of it. So, and trying to protect those, the water table and water sources. So moving on into the tools that are available. We're really just looking at some key sources of sedimentation, but what some of the good practice stuff is. So this is in the non-regulatory space, but there's a lot of really good stuff out there. In the urban space, we've got Nelson Tasman erosion and sediment guidelines. We've got them all up online, got a big thick document as well. And so this addresses both urban and rural issues, but there's a whole variety of practices there for erosion and sediment control that can be used. They're highly effective in terms of reducing the generation of sediment and its discharge from, for example, earthworks construction sites. They really advocate for re-establishing vegetation cover as soon as possible. In the rural space, we have really good management practices which operate at that national level, and then they come down to codes of practice and guidelines at that more industry level, and again the farm plans that I mentioned. In the forestry space, we've got those national regulations that you're still bedding in and waiting to see the results of those, but the bespoke ones, we've got some specifics here to do with the granite. So the granite management plan's been around for a while. Obviously, Joe's left today to train up people in that space and put them in the particular mode of what we can do to have good practice on those soils. Fundamentals of good practice, I'm only 2 slides away. As I mentioned before, really about minimising the bare area and the length of time it's exposed. So, we really advocate for as soon as possible and at least within 12 months. Might look to tighten that, wait and see. We've got, of course, buffers and setbacks, and those set up in various regulations, the slopes, and advocating for as much as possible to have a permanent vegetation setback from waterways, using erosion and sediment control. So there's a whole lot of silt traps and sediment retention ponds and things like that. Tools and where to access them. The erosion sediment control guidelines are all online, and they are addressing particular land use activities, so they can be really useful and helpful. We have the Tasman District Council has a nursery available with planting that you can use for erosion control. There's a certain number of poplars which are very fast growing with a great root mass. And if anyone is interested in accessing some of those, Helen's a good person to have a chat to, and she can get you set up with the person in council who oversees that. We have a land and freshwater plan change, which is in the making, waiting on what's happening with central government changes. If you want to keep abreast of what's happening in that space, I can encourage you just to register for the newsletter, which you can go through our website, go onto Shape Tasman and register your name, or you can email the address that I've got there, and then you can get updates on when that's happening. We will release a draft, which is for public consultation. That doesn't lock it into the formal notification process that precedes that. So we can get feedback that can help to refine the regulations, or you're welcome to talk to a duty planner anytime. So those are the key tools. I'm over than time.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Jenna now.